Hello my cute nestlings! In today's video we are going to have 100 questions with the timer of 10 seconds. Don't forget to comment your score. Okay, now let's get into the video. Name the country that starts with I and ends with A. India. Name the country that starts with C and ends with A. Canada. Name the country that starts with A and ends with A. Australia. Name the country that starts with N and ends with L. Nepal. Name the country that starts with B and ends with L. Brazil. Name the country that starts with P and ends with U. Peru. Name the country that starts with J and ends with N. Japan. Name the country that starts with Y and ends with N. Yemen. Name the country that starts with O and ends with N. Oman. Name the country that starts with S and ends with A. Somalia. Name the animal that starts with E and ends with T. Elephant. Name the animal that starts with T and ends with R. Tiger. Name the animal that starts with L and ends with N. Lion. Name the animal that starts with Z and ends with A. Zebra. Name the animal that starts with Z and ends with E. Giraffe. Name the animal that starts with K and ends with O. Kangaroo. Name the animal that starts with C and ends with H. cheetah. Name the animal that starts with P and ends with R. Panther. Name the animal that starts with H and ends with A. Hyena. Name the animal that starts with R and ends with T. Rabbit. Name the bird that starts with P and ends with N. Penguin. Name the bird that starts with E and ends with E. Eagle. Name the bird that starts with O and ends with L. Owl. Name the bird that starts with S and ends with W. Sparrow. Name the bird that starts with P and ends with N. Pigeon. Name the bird that starts with F and ends with O. Flamingo. Name the bird that starts with K and ends with E. Kite. Name the bird that starts with P and ends with T. Parrot. Name the bird that starts with C and ends with W. Crow. Name the bird that starts with S and ends with N. Swan. Name the fruit that starts with A and ends with E. Apple. Name the fruit that starts with O and ends with E. Orange. Name the fruit that starts with B and ends with A. Banana. Name the fruit that starts with G and ends with E. Grape. Name the fruit that starts with P and ends with H. H. Name the fruit that starts with G and ends with A. Guava. Name the fruit that starts with P and ends with M. Plum. Name the fruit that starts with L and ends with E. Lime. Name the fruit that starts with P and ends with A. Papaya. Name the fruit that starts with M and ends with O. Mango. Name the vegetable that starts with C and ends with T. Carrot. Name the vegetable that starts with B and ends with I. Broccoli. Name the vegetable that starts with P and ends with O. Potato. Name the vegetable that starts with T and ends with O. Tomato. Name the vegetable that starts with C and ends with R. Cucumber. Name the vegetable that starts with O and ends with N. Onion. Name the vegetable that starts with R and ends with H. Radish. Name the vegetable that starts with C and ends with E. Cabbage. Name the vegetable that starts with S and ends with H. Spinach. Name the vegetable that starts with B and ends with T. Beetroot. Name the food that starts with P and ends with A. Pizza. Name the food that starts with B and ends with R. Burger. Name the food that starts with P and ends with A. Pasta. Name the food that starts with S and ends with H. Sandwich. Name the food that starts with N and ends with S. Noodles. Name the food that starts with D and ends with T. Donut. Name the food that starts with P and ends with E. Pancake. Name the food that starts with B and ends with O. Burrito. Name the food that starts with O and ends with T. Omelette. Name the food that starts with S and ends with P. Soup. Name the drink that starts with C and ends with E. Coffee. Name the drink that starts with T and ends with A. Tea. Name the drink that starts with J and ends with E. Juice. Name the drink that starts with L and ends with E. Lemonade. Name the drink that starts with M and ends with K. Milk. Name the drink that starts with S and ends with A. Soda. Name the drink that starts with C and ends with A. Cola. Name the drink that starts with W and ends with R. Water. Name the drink that starts with M and ends with E. Milkshake. Name the drink that starts with S and ends with E. Smoothie. Name the insect that starts with B and ends with E. B. Name the insect that starts with B and ends with Y. Butterfly. Name the insect that starts with M and ends with O. Mosquito. Name the insect that starts with D and ends with Y. Dragonfly. Name the insect that starts with A and ends with T. Ant. Name the insect that starts with C and ends with H. Cockroach. Name the insect that starts with B and ends with E. Beetle. Name the insect that starts with T and ends with E. Termite. Name the insect that starts with W and ends with P. Wasp. Name the insect that starts with C and ends with T. Cricket. Name the city that starts with L and ends with N. London. Name the city that starts with B and ends with N. Berlin. Name the city that starts with M and ends with I. Mumbai. Name the city that starts with D and ends with I. Delhi. Name the city that starts with T and ends with O. Tokyo. Name the city that starts with P and ends with S. Paris. Name the city that starts with D and ends with I. Dubai. Name the city that starts with R and ends with E. Rome. Name the city that starts with S and ends with E. Sydney. Name the city that starts with C and ends with O. Chicago. Name the thing that starts with C and ends with R. Computer. Name the thing that starts with T and ends with E. Telephone. Name the thing that starts with B and ends with K. Book. Name the thing that starts with C and ends with A. Camera. Name the thing that starts with P and ends with L. Pencil. Name the thing that starts with B and ends with E. Bottle. Name the thing that starts with T and ends with E. Table. Name a thing that starts with C and ends with R. Chair. Name the thing that starts with M and ends with R. Mirror. Name the thing that starts with U and ends with A. Umbrella. For more interesting puzzles, please do like and subscribe.